Welcome to the KuppingerCole Analyst chat. I'm your host. My name is Matthias. I'm lead advisor and senior analyst with KuppingerCole Analysts. My guest today is one of the founders of KuppingerCole Analysts and the principal analyst. It is Martin Kuppinger. Hi, Martin. Good to see you.
Hi, Matthias. Pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to have you again. And we want to talk about one aspect that is often ignored or not really deeply looked into. We want to look at proper management of enterprise infrastructure, no matter where it actually is deployed, be it in the cloud, be it on-prem, hybrid, be it serverless. So the proper management across all these platforms by better understanding what actually criticality is, what the relevance and what the impact on a business is. What is your opinion on that topic of managing infrastructure in general?
Yeah, so I came across this topic in a couple of conversations I had, for instance, with some of the KEAM/DREAM vendors, so cloud infrastructure entitlement management or dynamic resource entitlement and access management vendors, which start at with the position that they say in the public cloud environments, so AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, we have the problem that we need to manage service access to resources. And yes, this is a challenge. But in some of this discussion, then there came the notion up that this is a new challenge. And I believe it's just something which is emerging and which is getting more complex, and that the differentiating factor neither is whether it's the cloud, nor the service account. When you look at a traditional privileged access management solution or the PAM solution, that always was about saying we manage access of service accounts to certain resources. In that case, very static. The technical accounts to that Linux server, to that Windows server, etc. But at the end, it was how can I control it? How can I limit this? How can I manage it? What happened is that the number of service accounts or service identities is growing rapidly when we go into today's modern IT environments. So we just have more of them. We have more workloads. We have more resources. We have the compute, the storage resources in a different manner. So that was the one big change. It is more of these sort of service identity, service accounts. It are more resources because everything is more dynamic. So my perspective is the fundamental shift is really this evolution from a static IT to a very dynamic, very agile IT, where workloads are way more dynamic. And that happens not only in the big public clouds, that also happens in your private cloud. That happens everywhere where you run a Kubernetes cluster and stuff like that. So it's bigger, and it is an evolution more than a revolution.
Right, and you've already mentioned it. I think this Kubernetes as a basis for the orchestration of infrastructure comes with the beauty of saying I don't care where applications or where infrastructure or where services are actually deployed. I deploy them where they are required to be deployed, and no question whether I have an AWS subscription and that makes me deploy it there. But to say this is a workload. It has a criticality. It has business impact and business benefit, and I will describe it in general what it needs. It will need, as you said, privileged accounts. It will need resources, data. It need user accounts, service accounts, and once this is described, and this is a template, a policy in the end, then it can be orchestrated to run where it is required to be. So you need this level of abstraction that Kubernetes obviously gives you. And then you can say, let's deploy it where it needs to run and let's scale it up if required. Does that meet your view of things as well?
I think what meets my view is that, yes, we have this abstraction between the sort of the traditional static physical server. So we will say this is the hardware, this is the metal. We have an operating system on it. Okay, then over time there came VMware, which or other virtualization technologies which added a little bit to that. But right now this has really changed, and it gets more volatile, more dynamic, and that changes the way we need to manage it. So when something is static, you can easily say, okay, I configure this for that server, and the server will run for the next couple of years, and I don't care much anymore about changes. In that new world you just described, it is very different because it is harder to get a grip on, and you need to be also more abstract in the way you're working, because you think more in more different types of resources and relatively abstract resources without knowing what is the metal, so to speak, behind that.
Right, and we've mentioned that in an earlier episode that that the complexity that results from this dynamic characterization of the infrastructure can only be handled when it is well done, when it is automated as much as possible. So we need to get to proper approaches also to deal with this dynamic infrastructure, no matter where it runs. How could this be achieved? There need to be technologies around that support you in getting to grip with this complexity, right?
Yeah, I already mentioned one set of technologies, which is DRAM or KEEM area. I think basically the point when we go a little bit more abstract, what we need is we need to understand what is out there, in resources we consume, which environments do we have, what are all these assets in a sort of some way, what are the things we have to manage. That is the one part of it, and then we need to use technology to apply and to create policies and to apply policies to that, so that we have something where we say we automate that management based on policies. We add a governance layer for sure as well. That might be augmented in some way by some level of AI ML or not. But it is about, from my perspective, really then having an automation, policy-based automation for managing these dynamic environments, because the policies are at the end then the static element. You describe a policy which says this can be done or this can't be done, which is generic enough to apply to a changing world, and then you get back to something which you can control. It's way easier to control things that are static than controlling things that are dynamic. And this is, I think, where we sort of get on this control layer again. And so that is basically my answer. And we described this, as you said, in a couple of concepts. So I talked in my keynote at our European Identity and Cloud Conference 2021. I talked about 3 of these concepts: a basis for, generally speaking, how can you come to an efficient creation and management and operation of applications in an agile environment. So how do you deliver to the business? Which was more the approach, how do you do the development, the agile development, and DRAM as how do you deliver and manage and secure the infrastructure below that. So I hint to that, and I'm sure, Matthias, you will link that keynote recording to this episode. So I think we need to modernize a lot of things, and we're on that journey. I see a lot of vendors doing great stuff here around policy-based automation, around managing dynamic workloads. So we are on that road already. We are on track, but it's still some way to go.
Right, and for people interested in that topic, they might look at standards, at technologies, at protocols, at languages like OPA that lay the foundation for policy static-based description of rules, of a rule set, of a corporate policy, and that can then be used no matter in which aspect it is then deployed, be it for network access, for identity and access management, or be it for the deployment of infrastructures, as you've mentioned before. So it's really having a common set of policies that would be then, as you said, the stable factor, the static factor, and from that you would derive the actual incarnations of the infrastructure at deploy time or at runtime, but to have a strong foundation to build upon. As you've mentioned, I will link to the keynote, and I think people wanting to educate there, I of course recommend to go to the website of KuppingerCole Analysts and to search for the topics that are related to that. That might be DREAM, so DREAM. That might be CIEM to get the bigger picture, to see how things play together, but also start with the keynote from the EIC and maybe also some of the episodes from that podcast. For the time being, thank you very much, Martin, for being my guest today, for having a look at this static versus dynamic and how to deal with that aspect of modern dynamic IT. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you very much, Matthias.
Bye-bye.